The new owner offered me a 40% pay cut after 14 years of hard work. I refused, resigned, and a man in an expensive suit, tapping on his tablet screen, declared, "Your profit margins are too low, and I see at least 3 areas for immediate cost cutting, starting with employee compensation." I sat across the table, stunned, as Brian Hayes, the new regional manager from Brightpo Veterinary Partners, explained that my 14-year career at Oakwood Veterinary Clinic was now worth exactly 60% of my current salary. "Nothing personal, Dr. Langdon, just business," he said with a rehearsed smile. "We need to align your pay with industry standards." My name is Jessica Langdon. I'm 41, and I've dedicated my entire professional life to the animals of Lexington, Kentucky. What started as a job at a small family-owned veterinary clinic right after vet school became a mission I poured my heart into. I helped grow Oakwood from a 2-room practice into a respected institution, a cornerstone of the local community. "I understand this is a transition," I replied calmly, though my heart raced. "When do these changes take effect?" "Next pay cycle," Brian answered, already glancing at his tablet. "We need your decision by Friday." When Dr. Harrington, the clinic's founder, decided to retire and sell, we were all nervous, but he assured us Brightpo would preserve the clinic's values. "They understand what we've built here," he said at the announcement dinner. Now, 3 weeks after the sale, I faced a choice: accept a drastic pay cut or leave the clinic that had become my second home, where I'd trained every vet tech, knew hundreds of animals by name, and where clients specifically requested me for their pets. "Thank you for your candor," I said, standing. "I'll let you know by Friday." Brian nodded, eyes still on his tablet. As I reached the door, he called after me, "Oh, and Jessica, we're rolling out a new scheduling system next week. The training manual's in your inbox." At the front desk, I paused. Valeria, our receptionist of 12 years, was updating patient records. Her worried expression told me she already knew. "You too?" I asked quietly. She nodded. 30% cut, plus reduced hours. "What are you going to do?" she whispered, glancing at the clients in the waiting area. A golden retriever sitting patiently beside an elderly man, a woman clutching a cat carrier, a child petting a rabbit on their lap. "I don't know yet," I said, "but something tells me things here are about to change, and not for the better." A resolve began to grow inside me. This wasn't just about my salary. It was about everything we'd built, everything we stood for. I looked at the clinic, the work of my life, and knew I had to act. I always believed being a good veterinarian wasn't just about medical expertise. It's about connecting with animals, of course, but equally with their owners. Over 14 years, I vaccinated puppies and later helped those same dogs cross the Rainbow Bridge. I sent handwritten condolence notes after tough losses and celebrated miraculous recoveries. My phone number was saved in countless families' contacts as Dr. Jessica for emergencies. My apartment walls were covered with thank you cards and photos of pets I'd treated. Children's drawings of animals I'd saved decorated my fridge. These weren't just clients. They were deep bonds. "You worked for Brightpo before, right?" I asked Thomas, our newest veterinarian, over lunch the next day. At 32, he'd joined us 6 months ago after working at a corporate clinic in Nashville. He nodded grimly. 3 years. It always starts the same. Cost cutting, then efficiency pushes, then pressure to upsell unnecessary services. "What about care quality?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "It's all numbers," he said. "How many patients per hour? How many add-ons sold? How much revenue generated?" He poked at his salad. "I got tired of being told to push unneeded dental procedures to hit monthly quotas. That's why I left." That afternoon, between appointments, I called Dr. Harrington. After 30 years of practice, he'd retired to a lake house, spending his days fishing and writing the veterinary memoirs he'd always dreamed of. "I had no idea, Jessica," he said. his voice heavy with regret. Their reps swore they valued our clinic's culture. I'd never have sold if I'd known. It's not your fault, I reassured him. You earned your rest. I just need to make a decision. What are you thinking? He asked. I hesitated. The idea was forming, but saying it aloud would make it real. I'm considering opening my own clinic. A brief silence, then, You should do it, he said. You've got the experience, the client relationships. Lexington needs a clinic that puts care above corporate profits. After the call, I sat in my office, staring at my diplomas and certificates. I thought of conversations with clients over the years, many saying how grateful they were that we weren't one of those assembly line vet clinics. A knock interrupted me. It was Margie, our lead tech for 8 years. Sorry to bother you, Dr. Langdon, but Mrs. Peterson's here with Baxter. She asked for you specifically, even though she's booked with Dr. Morris. Tell her I'll be right there, I said, standing to see the 10-year-old beagle I'd treated since he was a pup. In that moment, I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just about the pay cut. It was about preserving what mattered. By Friday morning, I had a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I'd spent evenings researching commercial real estate, equipment costs, and small business loans. I contacted 3 former colleagues who'd successfully opened their own clinics. The more I explored, the more right it felt. At 9 a.m., I knocked on Brian's door. Come in, his distracted voice called. I found him on a video call. I'll call back, he told the screen, turning to me. Jessica, good. Have you decided? Yes, I said, handing him an envelope. This is my 2-week resignation notice. His professional mask slipped, revealing genuine surprise. You're quitting over a standard market adjustment? I'm pursuing a new opportunity, I corrected. I wanted to notify you properly so you can arrange coverage for my patients. Brian leaned back, studying me. I expected this from some support staff, but not you. You're the senior vet. This is how corporate acquisitions work. Everyone adjusts. I understand business realities, I said carefully, and I've made my own business decision. He shrugged, reaching for my resignation letter. We'll have HR prepare your exit paperwork. I assume you're joining another clinic? Something like that, I replied vaguely. News of my resignation spread through the clinic like wildfire. By lunch, Valeria, Margie, and Thomas pulled me aside in quiet moments. Is it true? Valeria whispered as we stood by the filing cabinets. Yes, I confirmed. My last day's in 2 weeks. What's next? She pressed. I hesitated, then trusted her. I'm opening my own clinic. I found a space on Maple Avenue. Her eyes widened. Seriously? Jessica, that's amazing. Similar conversations followed. Thomas was immediately interested. Keep me posted, he said meaningfully during a brief break between appointments. That night I sat at my kitchen table with a notepad, drafting lists and plans. My phone buzzed with a text from Margie. Whatever you're planning, I'm in. Over my 3rd cup of tea, I realized the magnitude of what I'd set in motion. As I left the clinic, Mrs. Davidson stopped me in the parking lot. Her cat, Oliver, had been my patient since she adopted him 6 years ago. I heard you're leaving, she said, genuinely concerned. Is it true? When I confirmed, her response was instant. Where are you going? Because Oliver and I will follow you. That simple loyalty made me see what I hadn't fully grasped. I wasn't just a vet to these people and their pets. I was their vet. That bond meant something, and Brightpo had severely underestimated its value. Looking at my notes, I felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about rejecting an unfair pay cut. It was about building something better, a clinic that honored the trust families placed in me. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my career. I maintained absolute professionalism, giving every animal the same care. but tension hung over every interaction with management. Brian started observing my appointments, tablet in hand, taking notes on efficiency opportunities. He scheduled an exit interview for my last day and sent daily reminders of my ongoing obligation not to solicit clients or staff, a clause that, after consulting a lawyer, I learned was largely unenforceable in Kentucky. Brian didn't know I'd already signed a lease for a space 7 minutes across town, a former pediatric office with most of the needed infrastructure in place. I secured financing through a local bank I'd been a client of for over a decade, and equipment suppliers I'd worked with for years offered favorable terms for the new clinic. "We value relationships too," a medical equipment rep told me over lunch. "And frankly, we've seen what happens to quality when Bright Poe takes over. We're happy to support independent practices." I kept my plans quiet at the clinic, but rumors spread. Clients asked direct questions during appointments. "Where's your new clinic going to be?" Mrs. Thompson asked while I examined her terrier's ear infection. "I haven't finalized anything," I replied cautiously, aware of the new computer system's microphone, installed last week for Bright Poe's quality assurance. She lowered her voice. "Well, when you do, let me know. Max won't see anyone else." These conversations happened daily, each reinforcing my resolve. This wasn't just a career move. It was about preserving a standard of care that mattered to the community. On the Wednesday of my final week, Brian called me into his office again. His demeanor had shifted. Corporate confidence gave way to barely veiled irritation. "Several clients have asked about your plans," he said without preamble. "I need to remind you of your contractual obligations." "I'm aware of my obligations," I replied calmly. "And I've made it clear to everyone I have no concrete plans to announce." He tapped his pen on the desk. "We've invested heavily in acquiring this clinic, Dr. Langdon. Bright Poe won't take kindly to any attempts to undermine that investment." "I understand," I said. "Anything else?" He studied me for a moment. "We're prepared to revisit your compensation package. Perhaps we were too aggressive with the initial adjustment." The offer caught me off guard. The first hint that Bright Poe might realize their mistake. But it was too late. The lease was signed, equipment ordered, and my vision for Riverbank Veterinary Hospital was taking shape. "Thank you, Brian, but my decision's final," I said. Later that day, Valeria slipped me a folded note. Inside was a list of 20 clients' names and a simple message. "These people called today, specifically asking for you." At the bottom, she added, "When you're ready to hire a receptionist, call me first." That night, I met Thomas and Margie at a coffee shop miles from the clinic, far enough to avoid Bright Poe run-ins. I finally shared my plans in detail. "I've secured a space on Riverbank Drive," I said. "It'll be called Riverbank Veterinary Hospital, opening in about 6 weeks if all goes to plan." 6 weeks, Margie echoed thoughtfully. "My hours get cut in 3. "Interesting timing," Thomas said, leaning forward. "What's your staffing plan?" "I need a vet who shares my care philosophy," I said, meeting his eyes. "And an experienced lead tech." Their smiles told me everything. By the time we left the coffee shop, my new clinic had its first unofficial hires. But I didn't anticipate Bright Poe would force me to move faster than planned. My penultimate day at Oakwood began with a nasty surprise. A new price list hung in the break room, effective immediately, with an average 30% hike for all services. Basic vaccinations jumped from $45 to $65. Dental cleanings soared from $300 to $425. More alarming were new care packages in bold print, bundles including tests rarely needed for healthy animals. The comprehensive wellness package required 3 separate diagnostics most pets didn't need for routine visits. "They're not even hiding it," Jenna, a young vet who joined just before the acquisition, whispered. "Dr. Morris told me we're supposed to push the premium package to every client today." My heart sank. This wasn't just corporate optimization. It was exploitation. When Mrs. Whitaker brought in her elderly cat, Chairman Meow, for an arthritis check, I faced an impossible situation. New protocols required recommending a full senior panel costing nearly $500, though we'd run those tests 2 months ago. "Is this really necessary so soon?" Mrs. Whitaker asked, visibly worried. On a fixed income, she budgeted carefully for her cat's care. "The new owners implemented standard protocols," I explained cautiously. "But in my professional opinion, given Chairman's recent normal results, we could wait 4 months for these tests." She looked relieved, but my compromise didn't last. Brian, apparently monitoring the visit via the new electronic system, entered the room before I could finish. "Mrs. Whitaker, I'm Brian Hayes, Regional Manager," he said with a practiced smile. "I couldn't help but notice we haven't scheduled the senior wellness package for Chairman." What followed was a masterclass in pressure tactics, subtle hints that skipping tests was negligent, mentions of early detection, and a one-time discount still exceeding the test's true cost. I watched Mrs. Whitaker's face shift from confusion to guilt to resignation as she agreed, clutching her purse tighter. After she left, Brian pulled me aside. "Dr. Langdon, when we recommend a protocol, we expect our vets to fully support it." "Those tests aren't necessary now," I said firmly but quietly. "This isn't about health. It's about revenue." "It's about standardized care," he countered. "Your personal attachment to clients is clouding your professional judgment." I nearly laughed at the absurdity. "My attachment to clients is called building trust. It's why this clinic thrived for decades." He glanced at his watch, dismissing me. "Fortunately, we only have to manage that approach for 1 more day." The rest of the day continued in the same vein. Brian intervened in my appointments if I didn't push protocols aggressively enough. By closing, I was emotionally drained. While updating Chairman Meow's file, I noticed something that chilled me. An administrative note read, "Patient reassigned to Dr. Morris, effective immediately. Dr. Langdon no longer primary vet." Checking other longtime patients revealed the same. They were reassigning my clients before I'd even left. That night, I couldn't sleep. I'd planned to leave quietly, giving myself time to set up the new clinic before announcing it to clients. But Brightpo's aggressive tactics and willingness to exploit client trust changed everything. At 2 a.m., I made a decision. Sitting at my computer, I emailed the lawyer helping with my new clinic. "We need to accelerate the timeline. How soon can we open, even in a limited capacity?" Her reply came surprisingly fast. "With temporary equipment rentals and creative scheduling, potentially 2 weeks. Call me in the morning." I closed my laptop, finally relaxed enough to sleep. Tomorrow was my last day at Oakwood, and it wouldn't go as Brian Hayes expected. My final day arrived with a sense of both closure and beginnings. I spent the morning making calls and setting things in motion. Parking in my usual spot for the last time, I felt an odd calm. The morning passed in emotional farewells with colleagues who'd become family. Even newer staff who barely knew me seemed touched by the shifting atmosphere. "Light schedule today," Valeria noted when I stopped by the front desk. "Yeah," I replied. Brian had blocked most of my day for transition activities. "Paperwork before I'm out, I guess." We didn't say aloud that my regular clients had already been reassigned. At noon, Brian called me to the conference room for a so-called exit protocol meeting. I expected standard formalities, returning keys, signing final documents, maybe a nod to my years of service. Instead, I found Brian with 2 strangers, a regional lawyer for Brightpo and the HR director. "Before we process your exit, we need to address some concerns," Brian began, his tone formal. "We've learned you may be planning to open a competing clinic, violating your employment agreement." The lawyer, a stern woman in her 50s, slid a document toward me. This is a cease and desist letter regarding any plans to practice veterinary medicine within 20 miles of this facility for 1 year. I glanced at the document but didn't touch it. I don't recall signing a non-compete agreement. It's included in the transition documents all employees signed during the acquisition, she replied smoothly. Actually, I said, pulling a folder from my bag, I have copies of everything I signed. There's no non-compete clause. I placed the folder on the table. My lawyer confirmed this yesterday. The room's atmosphere shifted. Brian's confident expression faltered. We're not here for legal disputes, he said quickly. We just want a smooth transition for our clients. Your clients, I corrected softly. I agree their care shouldn't be disrupted. The HR director, sensing a chance to de-escalate, spoke conciliatorily. Dr. Langdon, you've been with this clinic for years. Perhaps we can find a compromise. I smiled. I'm always open to reasonable solutions. 2 hours of negotiations followed, ending in a simple agreement. I wouldn't actively solicit Oakwood clients for 30 days, and Bright Poe would drop any claims restricting where or when I could practice. By the end, I was officially done at Oakwood Veterinary Clinic. I gathered my personal items, said final goodbyes, and walked to my car with a mix of nostalgia and excitement. As I pulled out of the lot, I got a text from Valeria. Just overheard Brian on the phone with corporate. He said, "She's just one vet. How much damage can she do?" I smiled and typed back, "Guess we'll find out." Brian and Bright Poe didn't realize I wasn't just leaving. I was 2 steps ahead. The wheels were already turning, and nothing could stop what was coming. Riverbank Veterinary Hospital opened its doors exactly 17 days after I left Oakwood. The timeline was ambitious, requiring round-the-clock work, temporary equipment rentals, and a skeleton crew pulling double shifts. But we made it. Thomas joined as my second vet. Margie became our lead tech after her hours at Oakwood were cut to part-time. Valeria resigned the day the new reception desk was installed, citing a hostile work environment in her Bright Poe exit letter. We planned the first day as a soft opening to test systems with a few appointments before a full launch the next week. I personally called only about 20 long-time clients whose pets had chronic conditions I'd managed. At 8:45 a.m., 15 minutes before opening, I looked out the window and froze. A line of people and animals stretched across our small parking lot and down the sidewalk. "Did you call all of them?" Thomas asked, eyes wide. "No," I said, stunned. "Just a few urgent cases." Valeria, already at the front desk entering our new management system, grinned. "Looks like word got out." When we opened the doors, familiar faces flooded in. Mrs. Peterson with her beagle Baxter, the Garcia family with their 3 rescue cats, Mr. Johnson with his ancient tortoise Methuselah, clients I'd served for years, some for decades. "We saw in the local Facebook group you were opening today," Mrs. Peterson explained. "No one wanted to miss it." By lunch, we'd registered over 70 pets in our system. By closing, that number doubled. Every client said the same thing. They were following their vet, not the clinic's brand. The small gestures of support touched me most. Clients brought homemade cookies, congratulatory cards, and small gifts for the new clinic. One family even delivered pizza for the staff's lunch. That evening, after an exhausting but exhilarating day, I got a text from a former Oakwood colleague. "Emergency meeting scheduled tomorrow morning. Sounds like the schedule's suddenly empty." The next week exceeded even my most optimistic projections. We had to expand hours and hire more staff to handle the patient influx. By the end of the first month, we'd registered over 800 pets, about 70% of Oakwood's former client base. What surprised me wasn't just the number of clients who followed, but how they found us. We'd done minimal advertising, relying on word of mouth and small local newspaper ads. Yet clients kept coming, often saying they'd heard about us from friends, neighbors, or local social media groups. "The pet groups are buzzing about your new place," one client said while I examined her Labrador puppy. "Everyone's talking about how you stood up to that corporate chain." I didn't set out to be a symbol of resistance against corporate veterinary care, but the narrative took hold. People shared stories of their experiences with Brightpo's new prices and protocols, contrasting them with our transparent fees and personalized care. 3 months after opening, Dr. Harrington, my former mentor and Oakwood's previous owner, stopped by unannounced. "I had to see it for myself," he said, looking around with undisguised approval. "You've built something special, Jessica." As we toured the clinic, staff and clients greeted him warmly, many saying they missed him but were thrilled with the new practice. "I made a mistake selling to Brightpo," he admitted quietly as we finished the tour. "I should have talked to you first." "It worked out as it should," I reassured him. Later that day, I received an email that closed the loop. It was from Brian Hayes, requesting a meeting to discuss Lexington's veterinary landscape. I smiled as I typed my reply. "I'm free Tuesday at 2 p.m. Nothing personal, just business." Looking around the thriving clinic we'd built, filled with wagging tails, purring patients, and a team I trusted, I realized sometimes the best revenge isn't just success. It's creating the place you were always meant to be.